G'day, ZiggyD here, and today I'm going to be giving you guys a full and in-depth guide to my new Demon Hunter build, CinderStrafe. If you haven't seen the previous video, I released a video yesterday that was sort of a proof of concept that showed the build in action farming Act 3 in the Alkaizer run, and I managed to pull somewhere around 55.5 million experience per hour, which is pretty good for a what is meant to be a gimmicky skill. So, I'll split this guide into three parts. First, I'll look at the skill choices and the follower choice. Then I'll give you guys a full gearing guide, the gearing requirements and the actual pieces that I'm using. And then finally, I'll give you some more general gameplay tips. So let's jump straight into the skills. Now, of course, the prime skill itself is Strafe, and Strafe has a number of rune choices which have potential to be viable. However, in practice, Demolition is the only one that I've actually found to be viable. And the reason for this is it does a lot more damage, and it has a decent area of effect that does a really good job of proccing life on hits and Night Stalker, which will come in handy and be really important later on. Rocket Storm tends to hit more than the grenades, but it just doesn't seem to proc that life on hit or Night Stalker as well as Demolition does. So you can play around with other runes if you want, but in my experience so far I've only found Demolition to be practical. So on my what is usually a main attack, I used to have a Hatred Generator on my previous Strafe build, but instead I've ditched that for the Chakram Shuriken Cloud skill, which essentially gives you a 2-minute area of effect damage around your character. And since you're going to be pathing through mobs pretty much 100% of the time, this adds quite a bit of damage. And I'm also 99% sure that it procs Night Stalker, which means that you're getting extra discipline regen as you're walking through things, which is awesome. And I can't actually think of another instance in the game where this skill would be useful, but it's extremely useful in this build. So the next skill we have is Vault with Trail of Cinders, which is sort of the other crucial damage output side of this. I've had people ask me whether Trail of Cinders was necessary, and I actually think the Trail of Cinders damage output is huge, and it also does a really good job of proccing life on hit as well. So with Vault, you're going to be vaulting from pack to pack and through the packs as well, and strafing sort of in between your vaults. And the way that this ends up working out is that Strafe will be fueling your vaulting, so the more you're strafing, the more you can vault as well. So it sort of creates this really fast movement, which you'll see later, and you've probably seen if you watched the previous video. So Smoke Screen with Breathe Deep will regenerate your hatred a little bit if you need it, but it's also a great defensive skill if you in a situation where you don't need to vault or don't want to vault. Sometimes it's too dangerous to vault if there's a lot of ground area of effects, especially when you're fighting elites. And although Vault can give you extra damage output, Smoke Screen is going to allow you to strafe for a bit longer by refueling your hatred, and it's also going to keep you safe. So this sort of combination of lots of life on hit from Strafe, Vault, and then the defensive side of Smoke Screen means that you actually don't need extremely high defensive stats, despite this being sort of a tanky appearing build. So next up we have Preparation with Focused Mind, which gives you the 45 discipline over 15 seconds, and this is pretty important. I've tried different preparation runes, but having that sort of slowly filling up discipline really suits the build a lot more because your resources are dancing around quite a bit, so having it like an increased regeneration rather than an instant dump of discipline sort of suits the build a lot more, and in practice it's a lot easier to use. If you're used to the other preparation runes, then it'll take a little bit of practice to get used to the idea of the regeneration instead of an instant replenishment of your discipline, but after a couple runs you should be pretty familiar with it. So Companion with the Bat Companion is pretty obvious. It just gives you an extra 3 hatred per second, which is just for fueling your strafe, and you'll notice if you haven't put your Bat Companion up that you will sort of run out of hatred from your strafe. Now as for the passives, these are sort of like the backbone of the build here. We have Vengeance, which increases your hatred base, and it also gives you extra hatred whenever you pick up with a health globe, which is actually a huge part of the reason why this build can move and farm so quickly. When you're vaulting through things with Trail of Cinders and strafing things down, they're dying really quickly. A lot of trash mobs dying really quickly and dropping tons of health globes. And this is actually the reason why I was able to switch out from my previous Strafe build, which didn't have Vault and was a lot slower. So the other resource sort of replenishing side of things we have is Night Stalker, which critical hits will restore 1 discipline. Now this is all coming from Strafe, so every time Strafe crits, you have a chance of restoring discipline. It's not a 100% chance each crit, but in practice it happens quite a bit. So what you'll be doing is you'll be vaulting from pack to pack, strafing, and then the strafe will be replenishing your discipline so you can keep vaulting. And then tactical advantage increases your move speed quite a bit with vault. So in overall, this improves your run speed a lot more than having a bit of extra damage actually would. So in terms of follower choice, I'm just using the Templar mainly as a magic find follower. He can get the most possible magic find. I've done a guide to gearing out the Templar and the reason why you should use him in certain situations previously, which I'll link to. He's also quite handy for this build because of his Inspire skill, which increases your hatred regeneration by 1 per second, which makes a bit of a difference. So, in general, the main gearing requirements are that you have around 90k DPS as a minimum, and the reason for this is that you need to be killing trash mobs and elites pretty quickly, otherwise they won't be dropping health globes quickly enough and you'll run out of hatred. So I recommend if you're going to be attempting this strafe build over a previous strafe build that I've covered, then you're able to get at least 90k DPS, and that's if you're using a Stone of Jordan like I am. That includes sort of the Stone of Jordan elite damage. So if you're like 88 or something like that and have a Stone of Jordan, then I'd say you probably qualify as well. Now in terms of defensive stats, you want around 350 ore resists and 3,500 armor, or any sort of variation of those two. So you could have one or more of more of one or the other, but anything that sort of brings you up to around 55% damage reduction. And then for actual HP, you don't really need that much. I only have 25k. Having a bit more would maybe you'd die a little bit less, but overall, having less HP isn't detrimental to this build because you're getting a lot of life on hit and life regen, and that's actually made more effective by having a small HP pool because comparative to your total life, that health regeneration is better. So having higher resist is more important than having high HP. So next up, life on hit is pretty crucial to the build, and I recommend a minimum of 800. I have 885, and I'd be keen to add another couple hundred to this, maybe if I can get a ring or an amulet with one. Having over 1000 life on hit I think would be pretty sweet. Now to sort of buff that out a bit, you can have life regen. Life regen isn't crucial, but it certainly helps in this build, especially if you have a pretty low HP pool. Life regen becomes much more effective. So now, sort of a fundamental part of this build is that you have at least 40% crit chance, including any strafe bonuses that you have. So I have 40% base crit chance, but I also have 7% extra crit chance for strafe on my chest piece, and also 7% extra crit chance from strafe on my Stone of Jordan. So that means I actually have 54% crit chance with strafe, which is the only crits that are happening anyway. So if you have that bonus, then that counts for that, but at least 40% from all combined crit sources is enough to fuel your discipline regen from Night Stalker. Any lower than that and you probably won't be able to vault enough, and this build will feel pretty tacky. So the next thing is that attack speed is actually your last preference on gearing, and if you can get the slowest weapon possible, I'm using a Manticore at the moment, but previous to this I had a let's go have a look here. I had a pretty slow crossbow here with high damage. So a high damage slow weapon, it seems counterintuitive for this build, for such a fast moving build to have a slow weapon, but in practice having a slow weapon actually benefits you a lot more because you're chewing up a lot less hatred in order to keep strafing. Strafe spends that hatred a lot less and does more damage per hit. So that's actually pretty good because it actually makes this build a lot cheaper to gear for, because getting trifecta gear with attack speed is far more expensive than just getting crit chance and crit damage gear. And then the final thing, which is I'm happy is an important part of this build, is pickup radius. So I have 12 pickup radius, and I recommend getting this as a minimum. You could probably get by with 10, but 12 or more is good. I think the more the better, but maybe having on two pieces like 7% on each piece, or 7 and 5 on one like I've got, is good to do. And this is just because you don't want to ever have to actively pursue those health globes. They're just going to be dropping, and often they'll be dropping behind you as you tumble through things. So having a large enough pickup radius means you'll still get those health globes even if they do drop behind you. And this is what keeps your hatred up the whole time, and what keeps you strafing, and in turn keeps your discipline going so you can keep moving fast. So let's just look at some of the important pieces of my gear. Now, gloves are a huge source of crit chance, so try and get 10% crit chance gloves, and then if you have extra budget after that, you can add other things like main stats, defensive stats, and crit damage. If you're on a budget, just get crit chance and crit damage and leave the defensive stats for other pieces like your shoulders, pants, things like that. So another big source of crit chance is your braces. Try and get a max crit chance bracer if you can. I've got a 6% one here, which I'm pretty sure is max. And even if you have to forego other defensive stats, as I said earlier, you can get those on other pieces of gear. Now you want at least 24% move speed, because move speed is a big part of this. So I've got move speed from my boots and my Inner's Temperance at the moment. However, if you can't afford Inner's Temperance, a really cheap option, which also has the critical hit chance for Strafe, is the Inquisitor chest piece, which is a really budget piece of gear. You can get for 800,000, like for a really good piece. And it has regen, main stat, percent life. It has one of the skill bonuses, and it'll have that move speed on it, which is awesome. So you can get boots and then the chest piece with move speed, and you'll have 24% move speed. As for your quiver, I just recommend getting a Dead Man's Legacy. It's super cheap for how good it is. It is far and away better than any rare quiver you can possibly get, price even compared to price. So you'll get Dex Vitality in high numbers as a base. Try and get a low attack speed one if you can. It ranges from 10 to 20% attack speed. I've just gotten a 15% attack speed one here, and that's fine. It's got Hatred regen, which is good. Get a higher one if you can, but mostly get the one with 10% crit chance. I think it ranges between 9 or 10% crit chance, so even if you only have a couple 100,000 to spend on one, you're going to be able to get a pretty good quiver there. The skills it rolls, it can't actually roll Strafe, so don't worry about the skill at all. Just get whatever's cheapest. The 2% multi-shot one here was the cheapest one, because no one wants 2% multi-shot crit chance. As I mentioned earlier, on my weapon, I've just focused on getting a slow, strong weapon, so I've gotten a pretty decent one-socket Manticore here, which I think was actually sold to me by a viewer for a very decent price, so that was awesome. And then with your jewelry slots, mainly your amulet, try and get crit chance and crit damage. I've only gotten crit damage on here, but this is a pretty decent amulet. If I can find a decent amulet with crit chance, I'll upgrade that, because that extra crit chance is going to help with Night Stalker quite a bit. And then the final thing really is the Stone of Jordan. Stone of Jordan isn't 100% necessary, you can get away with a decent crit chance ring. However, this makes the biggest slowdown I found with this build was on elites. So having the Stone of Jordan with the extra elite damage overcame that, and it also has the crit chance on Strafe, which means your base crit chance can be lower, and in practice I found this to be better than actually a pretty decent ring that I had. It also has max discipline, which is somewhat helpful in the build. And everything else can just be filled out by the standard fare Demon Hunter stuff. Just get a nice balance, bringing you up to the stats that I mentioned earlier. So before my Nephil and Valor stacks run out, let's go take a look at a bit of an example, and I'll talk about some playstyle things. So the first thing to do is equip your Shuriken Cloud, which is, I just hold shift and left click to equip that, and your bat. So here I'll just hit smoke screen and just keep strafing over the top of this champion here until he goes down. And all the trash mobs should keep fueling me up with the health globes there. I barely even pay attention to the health globes, and most of the time I'll just be picking them up anyway. So as you approach a mob pack, you just want to start strafing and then vault into them so that your Trail of Cinders is hitting as much of them as possible, and that'll fuel your that'll put out a lot of damage and fuel your life on hit quite a bit. So you can sort of just leapfrog from pack to pack and just use the speed up from tactical advantage in between mob packs. So I'm out of discipline now, I'll just hit preparation, and that'll carry me through to the next mob pack where I can start regenerating my discipline from Strafe again. So same thing with these champions, I'll just hit smoke screen and stay on top of them. Since I kind of want to just take down this guy quicker, I can also vault over the top of him to make that Trail of Cinders. However, if you're taking a fair bit of damage, then you're best off using smoke screen, so it's the safer option for elites. So whenever we have a big pack like that, we just vault through them and just keep vaulting into the next packs. I get a fair bit of frame rate slowdown on this build just because it's moving quite quickly. So you just keep vaulting through those. You just sort of have to trust that your Trail of Cinders is going to kill most stuff. A lot of mobs will follow you after you run past them, and they'll follow you onto your Trail of Cinders. So anything that isn't killed by Strafe will very quickly be killed by the actual Trail of Cinders. So I used to do Alkaizer runs in around 14 or 15 minutes with my other Strafe build. I'm now doing them around 9 minutes, so it's a huge improvement just from the pure move speed increase, and also the kill speed increase from Trail of Cinders and the way that they fuel each other. It's been a massive improvement. It's not quite as gear friendly as the previous Strafe build. Like you need better gear to be able to do this. As I said, you need to be at least approaching that 90k DPS mark. But overall, it's it's not too hard to gear for compared to other Demon Hunter builds. Like, I can farm much faster than this than I can with a traditional build. I should just mention that the main point of this build is completely to farm Monster Power 0 Act 3 Alkaizer runs. On higher Monster Powers, you're simply not dropping health globes quickly enough, and you won't be able to fuel your Strafe, and you'll just run out of Strafe, and it'll slow down, and it'll feel horrible. So farm on Monster Power 0, even if you're used to farming higher Monster Powers, it's just for pure efficiency and run speed. It's also a ton of fun, so that's pretty awesome. Now, I've tried to make sure that I've covered everything in this, but there's quite a lot that sort of all goes into each other to making this build work, and quite a lot to consider. So if you have any questions, or you're trying it out and having troubles with it, then feel free to comment, and you can even post a link to your or post your character name and code, so I can check out your profile and check out your character and your gearing situation and see if there's any issues with that. Now, as a reward to any aspiring Strafe Demon Hunters that have watched this far, anyone else who's quit the video by now is not going to know about this, so you're sort of privy to this one. I'm actually going to give away a Demon Hunter Strafe set pretty soon. As you can see here, I've started building one up, mostly from gear that I've had, or that I've side graded from. Like, a lot of these are very close to the gear I've had. As I was saying earlier, this is a pretty good Inquisitor here, and I have a good pair of gloves, and all of these sorts of things. I'm going to be slowly building this up over the next couple days. Buying a few extra pieces and filling that out until it's pretty much a full Strafe Demon Hunter gear set, from what I think is important for the stats there. So if you don't exactly have the money to gear for a Strafe build, but are keen on playing a Strafe build, like you're really keen, you think it's going to be really awesome, and you dislike the normal sort of Demon Hunter style, then leave a post in the comments below. Try to keep it subtle, but maybe just post your or maybe actually send me a message. That's the best way to do it. Send me a message and give me a link to your Demon Hunter profile and say, you know, that you're keen in Strafe and why you're keen and that sort of thing. And I'll check out your current gearing situation, and I'll pick the person that I feel that it's going to go towards helping the most. So that's it for today. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.